quite a bit of snow on the ground in the Rocky Mountain region, and that's behind this strong Pacific system moving into the southern plains. And along with that, we have a moderate risk this afternoon in the Arklatex region. So let's take a look and see what we're dealing with. There's the synoptic low in the Red River region around the Wichita Falls area, cold front all the way down towards the Big Bend, the Serrania del Burros, and to the north, cold front, kind of a stationary transitioning into a cold front all the way up towards Chicago. The cold air coming in back behind it, not terribly cold, looking at 30s for the most part, but out to the west, unseasonably cold air with snow showers in Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and further up to the north, atmospheric river affecting Washington State and British Columbia. Quite a bit of snow up there in Alaska, another polar high moving down, and this is going to build in. We talked about that back on Wednesday. Pretty good push of Arctic air, which will be setting up over Yukon. You can see those temperatures are already close to zero in some areas, definitely below zero up there around Fairbanks, and it's just going to get worse. Not too much going on in northern Canada. A blob of Arctic air across Baffin Island, and moving down to the south, a winter storm moving through Quebec way up north of the populated areas. And back in those areas, Montreal, close to 70 degrees, looking at 70 this afternoon in Boston, and warm conditions all the way down the U.S. coast. The surface analysis this afternoon does show the moisture working northward, gusts up near 40 knots in some areas. This is the moisture ridge, dew points up near the mid-70s. That's a little bit higher than what we were looking at back on Wednesday, and I did under-forecast the severe weather a little bit because that's what usually tends to happen, but we've got ourselves a little bit more of a dynamic weather system. The Pacific front is working into central Texas. The air mass located right in this area here, that's the Pacific air. You can see how the temperatures drop. Well, I just drew over it, but 81 around Junction, down to 73 around San Angelo. In fact, that's San Angelo right there. Then down to 67 and then 63 at Pecos. Now, if this was behind the dry line, we would see that around the same as far as temperatures like 70s and lower 80s, or it would increase. And if we add the potential temperature markings, you would see, well, let me erase some of this. What you would see is a thermal ridge if this was a dry line. So the contours would be kind of looking like that. But that's not what we have. We've got actually thermal troughing with the colder air off to the west. So that's definitely going to be the Pacific front, roughly from about Abilene to Del Rio. And that's working its way eastward, and further up north, we've got the Canadian front coming down somewhere in this area. Don't know exactly where that is. This little thermal troughing right here, that's going to be convective outflow, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. But those are the plots. And the radar, of course, has the thunderstorms breaking out. Now, we've already got tornado warnings on some of these storms out around Hillsboro, south of Waxahachie, and a couple more problem areas up there around Sherman, Gainesville, out to Durant. Now, what we're looking for later this afternoon is, of course, we're going to get the forced convection along the Pacific front, probably right in here. That's going to be a little bit later. We're a little bit more concerned with some of these cells out ahead of the line. Those are going to be out in the warm sector, and we've got plenty of shear on hand and a little bit of clearing, so that'll help augment the instability. And I wanted to show you a paper that is relevant for today. This is from this year. It's a paper by Nicholas Hampshire, Ted Ryan, Chad Cravell, about these warm sector tornadoes in East Texas. And hopefully we're not going to see too many of those. But it is that kind of day where this paper is relevant, very timely. This was, in fact, received 2021 published February 2022, and that goes into some detail about these warm sector storms that are out ahead of the strong boundaries. So definitely check that out. That's going to be on the National Weather Association website, and that will be the link that will get you to that paper. All right, yeah, this stuff. Let me show you a couple rules of thumb when this convection is starting to get going. What you want to do is start establishing a baseline movement. And it helps to go down to the velocity data and see what's happening. I haven't set any of this up yet. I just pretty much opened this radar program. But you want to get your motion vector set up, and that'll help tease out some of the velocity data that you need to be looking at. So let's see, storm relative velocity, there's our couplet. Don't see anything too distinct in there just yet. I mean, that is the couplet there, but let's try to find a baseline motion on that. That's going to be roughly towards 030. All right, so what I'm trying to do is get an average motion on these severe cells. And we'll also use the reflectivity. I set a dot right there, right around where the hook is. And I'm getting a motion of about, 030. So what that means is until the track changes, which could happen if it strengthens quite a bit, until then you want to kind of use that reference motion to kind of figure out where it's going to go. So 030, that's going to take it into the Ennis area, and maybe later up towards Kaufman and Terrell. That's kind of a ways out right now. And you can use that for these other cells down the line. This could be a cell that gets going east of Waco, and if it holds together, that would track up towards Corsicana and west of Athens. Same thing on this. It's a little bit ahead of this other line, so I'm not really sure what's going to go on with that. But other cells down the line could also develop as well. So this could point to an active day in the next few hours, kind of in this area right here. So that will bear watching. And of course, we are using the AWIPS software, which is the same software used by the National Weather Service. We don't use any dumbed-down graphics on this channel. Everything that you see here are actual forecast tools that we use in forecasting, and when I worked the counter, we used a system called AWIDS, which was very similar to AWIPS. It was a long time ago, but let's go ahead and check out the forecast, high-resolution rapid refresh. And of course, the convection allowing models are very useful. The high-resolution rapid refresh model from 19Z, we'll take a look at that. It's definitely superior to what you can come up with manually. This would be impossible to figure out by hand. So we do use these tools. And what we see here is the main front off to the west, approaching Dallas-Fort Worth. That's going to be about 22Z, 5 p.m. And out ahead of it, numerous severe cells. And you can kind of see the comma shape on some of these, indicating the supercell characteristics. And those move off into the northeast Texas region, mostly along and north of US 79, very little down around Crockett and Lufkin. And eventually we get the forced convection along the front, and this is likely to be less severe because you've got extensive cell competition. And back behind it, you can see a little high-pressure area moving in. That's going to be a modeled meso-high, and then the main synoptic scale high back to the west, out there into West Texas. So take one more look at that. Yep, a round of severe weather just before dark. And then after dark, it looks like some of that moves up into the Arklatex region and gets absorbed by the line. So it looks like after 9 or 10 p.m., not seeing much of a signal for more of these cells out ahead of the line. It looks like everything just kind of becomes forced. You ever notice in Texas, it seems like every time we get these systems, we get late afternoon activity in Dallas, early evening activity here and late evening activity further to the east. I don't know why things time like that. I kind of wonder if there's a paper out there or if somebody's done a thesis, but this happens all the time. And today, certainly no exception. Let's take a quick look at the hemispheric pattern, look at the long waves. We've got, let's see, maybe 5 long waves. I don't know if that's 1 or 2 right there. There's probably 3, 4. I'm probably going to say that's 5 waves. So it is progressive. And that is going to correspond to a high zonal index. And certainly strong winds coming out of the Pacific. There they are. Let's see what we're looking at for the forecast. Jet coming onshore in the western U.S., digging that long wave. And we've got another trough developing in California midweek. Possible impacts in the central U.S. and definitely in the Rockies. And you see some amplification of the pattern late next week. There it is, strong ridge building into Alaska. Gets very wavy. So those are going to be medium scale waves just lined up there out into the Pacific. Still got the Pacific wide open, but divided up into these waves. And let's see how that pans out going towards the weekend. Looks like some of those close off. We shear out this cutoff low in Oregon next weekend. And we get a split flow pattern there for mid-month. Could be kind of cold in the eastern U.S. You can see that northwesterly flow coming there into the East Coast region. And still looks quite active out there in the Pacific. So looks like we're going to be facing maybe a couple more atmospheric river events somewhere on the West Coast. So let's run through the charts using the NAM and see how it looks this weekend into early next week. Well, there's the front. This is going to be this evening. That front links up into the Great Lakes, right like that. Ridge back behind it, only 10, 12, 10, 14 millibars back behind that. So a very lackluster push of cold air, but a cutoff low, or at least a cold pool out there over the Texas Panhandle. So some cold core convection out there in west Oklahoma, and then further up north, we got this other system moving through the northwestern region. And the fronts on that are going to look roughly like that. So let's put that into motion. See if we can get everybody on the same page there. That low pressure area will lift rapidly up there into the Midwest. We'll be in Illinois by tomorrow morning. By tomorrow afternoon, some showers hanging on there in the southeastern U.S., but not very extensive development. The cold front, all the dynamic lift, all that moving up to the north into Canada, and just not really leaving very much down south. But very likely there will be some sort of boundary pushing into that region. And then up to the north, Northern Plains system. That's it right there. So possibly some more snow showers in Utah tomorrow evening. And then moving that forward into Sunday. Another push of cold air through the plains, but that doesn't come very far south. And then we move into Monday, kind of a quiet day. You can see the ridging across much of the central and Midwest region. So kind of a light northeasterly flow coming from that, and things get stormy once again in the Pacific Northwest. And that's going to be the last frame there Monday evening. Warm advection setting right back up there in the plains. So mild south winds, and we'll focus once again on the Rockies for our next system when we come back for Monday's show. And you probably noticed something going on out there in the Bahamas. NHC is looking for some development out there in the Bermuda Triangle region, basically from Dominica up to Miami and just short of Bermuda itself. So the Bahamas could get interesting for next week. Hopefully we don't have any impacts there on the East Coast, but this time of year, that is something to be concerned about. Many of you may remember Hurricane Sandy. So it is that season, but that's still pretty far out. So we're going to return to that next week and take a closer look. Checking in on our storm there, it has moved quite a bit. This past hour, I've been, fighting with the software and trying to get this video edited, and that storm has moved all the way up through Ennis and is approaching Kaufman. So it's pretty much on track, like I said. So let's run this back and get a correction on our movement. And what I'm doing, let me see if I can shrink this a little bit to show you. Down at the bottom here in GR level 2, and probably GR level 3 has this as well, it's got this azimuth and distance measuring panel. So I can drop my storm marker or my place marker and move it along. And I can check the motion. So here it looks like we're closer to 040. So maybe 030 is good for non-severe, transitioning to 040 to 050 for severe storms. Now, typically in this very fast flow, you're not going to get those hard right movers. It certainly can happen, but for the most part, we're going to stay pretty close to these numbers through the afternoon. So that gives us a reference to use on these cells if they become discrete. So this could be a candidate right here. And using that 030 to 040 track, that's going to head up in this area, probably Fairfield to Athens. And that's a technique you can use for nowcasting. It's good for the next 30 to 45 minutes, and you just have to modify it for changes in motion and changes in cell structure. And you may have gaps and lines forming, and you kind of have to account for that as well. So, focusing on this snapshot of the Kaufman storm, of course, by the time you watch this video, everything will look different. But this is an educational video, so you can use these techniques for your own forecasting. So we look at the structure, and it looks kind of HP-ish. So in other words, this is the hook right here, and then there's convection further down to the south, so you may be getting some seeding into the storm, certainly a rainy updraft. And then we look at the base velocity. Actually, we should look at the storm relative velocity, especially in this sheared environment, and we see rotational convergence. I don't see a very tight meso on this. Let's look at the scale, looking at about 2 miles across, and the magnitude is going to be 22 out and 24 in, so about 40 to 50 knots of shear. So I'm hesitant to say that this is in the tornadic range, but given the parameters we have today, this would certainly be of concern. And of course, we can continue to forecast this, moving 030 to 040. That's going to bring it into, I guess, the area north of Wills Point and southwest of Sulphur Springs. And of course, another thing you want to keep an eye on is possible development of the tail end. So right here, that would be another area to keep an eye on. Of course, right now it doesn't look all that great, but the storm relative velocity is showing some indication of a couplet way down there. And of course, the movement on that will be initially 040, 030, so that should go up into Kaufman in the next 10 or 15 minutes. And then, of course, we're going to look at this other stuff further down the line if that comes together. So it could be kind of an active evening here. And at this point, I will need to get the video rendered and uploaded, which takes a while. Otherwise, you're going to be waiting quite a long time. And I'll leave you with some footage from Greg once again. Hope you have a great weekend. Take care, and we will see you on Monday for the supporters and Wednesday for everybody else. Have a good one. Bye-bye.